abnormalities on the cervix take 20 years to become cancer. And the cervical smear test was doing a great job. This is about hundreds and hundreds of millions of pounds. The cervical smear test was doing a great job. 20 years to become cancer. Andrew, come back in on that.
Well, this is kind of the herd immunization. If we give this vaccine to every woman in the world, we will eradicate cervical cancer. I don't believe that for 1 second. There's very little evidence for that. And you've got to take the risk-benefit of this vaccine. The benefit is that it will reduce that young girl's chances of getting cervical cancer. It'll reduce it. It won't eliminate it altogether. She still could get cervical cancer. Mm-hmm. And as you just said there, if women went for pap smear once every 2 years or so, it is a very slow-growing cancer. There are changes in the cervix that you can pick up, and there are a lot of things that can be done. I am far from convinced that vaccinating every girl in the world against cervical cancer is the way forward. I'm just very skeptical about it. I do believe that some of these parents have a valid point to make. Of course, sometimes it will be coincidental, but I don't believe that it is always coincidental. And I'd be very cautious about it.
Dr. Rynne, can I ask you one question? You're aware of the reporting of adverse events. This would be something, as a doctor, you'd be aware of, I take it, yeah?
Well, as a general practitioner, of course, I'd be aware of it, and I know exactly how abused it is, and how very little reporting is done. It's done on a voluntary basis.
But are you as a doctor?
Sorry, excuse me. Sorry,
William, let him answer the question. You've posed the question. Let Andrew answer the question. Go ahead, Andrew.
I would not rely on the reporting by GPs of adverse events. First of all, they may not be aware of it at all. Secondly, they may not consider it an adverse event of the vaccination. And it's a voluntary thing, and they're very busy people, and it's a very rough guide. So I wouldn't give any credence to the absence of reporting by general practitioners.
Okay. Regret have made a claim about, and as I say, their figures have varied, but they've made a claim of 400 girls being affected. How many have you seen?
I'm not in general practice in that sense anyway, and I would advise Regret to kind of tidy up their act a bit. They need to get a PR person to not make exaggerated claims. They may be making exaggerated claims because they haven't been advised to do otherwise. I take your point absolutely about or not being able to validate their claims of 400. I don't want to get into the numbers game, but if they're saying 400, I'll just say, well, there must be.
To be clear, they're saying that 400 are extremely
significant.
But right, let's talk about other countries in Europe then.
Yes.
Let's talk about Denmark, for example, where, and I'm just going to quote you a couple of people now. These are real people. This isn't, nonsense that you do see, unfortunately, in some areas of the alternative media. Dr. Stig Gerdes. It won't surprise me if we end up reaching several thousand girls who've been sick. I stopped administering it a few years ago after vaccinating about 100 patients. More than a handful of them became ill after the vaccine, several of them very, very seriously and completely devastated. And William, finally, Peter Lacour, the head of the Centre for Functional Disorders in Copenhagen, has expressed disgust that girls coming to be examined for some of these horrific, debilitating symptoms are being sent away on the grounds that they're imagining it. And I'm going to quote you. He says, "The handful of girls I've seen have not been mentally ill, but very physically sick and disabled. We simply cannot have sick people rejected under the assumption that they are mentally ill. None of us know anything about why they are so sick. Alleged knowledge of psychological reasons is scandalous character assassination of the young women." Peter Lacour, head of the Centre for Functional Disorders in Copenhagen. So, William, I submit to you that this is a phenomenon that's starting to grow around Europe. We've heard about it in Japan as well. We've heard of it in Germany. And as I just said there, in Denmark, over 1,300 cases. This is not isolated.
Okay. Well, we want to know exactly what we're talking about. So there's 2 points to make about that. First of all, Dr. Rynne notwithstanding, the overwhelming majority, and when I say overwhelming majority, I say far and away excess of 99% of medical practitioners are in favour of vaccination in general, and in particular this vaccination. Dr. Rynne is entitled to hold a contrary position, but it's important to recognise that he's very much in a minority, and he's entitled to be in a minority. The second point is there are many people who suffer from psychological disorders, and I think it is very disrespectful.
All of these girls. Hold
for 1 second. It is very disrespectful to people who suffer from psychological disorders, and psychological disorders can be serious and debilitating, and they can also be treated and get better. And to say that somebody who is suffering an illness should have the possibility that they are suffering from a psychological disorder investigated is not an insult.
It is when it's the very first port of call for these people. It is, William, to not properly investigate it. And Andrew deserves to say on this as well now.
Call, and we don't have any evidence of this. Regret have been unable to substantiate the numbers.
Let Andrew back in, William. Let Andrew back in on this particular point.
Yeah,
he is the GP. Go ahead.
I'd like to know where William got his 99% of general practitioners are in favour of the vaccine. Where did you get that figure from, William?
What I said was that the overwhelming
majority... No, you said 99%, yeah. Where did you get that figure from?
If I could just finish, what I said was the overwhelming number of doctors are in favour of vaccination. And
99%,
in general,
you said?
I don't think it's useful to fixate on that.
Well, it's a big figure. It's a very big figure.
Would you accept, Dr. Rynne, that the overwhelming proportion
of
doctors...
No, I wouldn't accept. And without some evidence, I wouldn't accept it at all.
Well, that's a fair point, and that may be some evidence I should get you.
Yeah.
Hold your horses for a minute, both of you. Here's a fact or two, and it's from The Economist. Let's talk about how these vaccinations get passed and how they are tested for efficacy even, easy for me to say, and for safety. You both know, and you'll know, William, that the drug companies themselves hire former FDA employees to assist them with getting a drug or a vaccine passed. This is a fact. They also hire leading experts as consultants. Some of them, of course, later called by the FDA to serve on their own screening panels. This is conflict of interest on steroids, right? All of these financial ties basically show a relationship between researchers working for drug companies and also working for the regulators. We call it the revolving door. You guys are too intelligent for me to be lecturing you on that. But this is deadly serious. Now, The Economist magazine has written this. Pharmaceutical companies bury clinical trials which show bad results for a drug and publish only those that show a benefit. The trials are often run on small numbers of unrepresentative patients, and the statistical analyses are massaged to give us a rosy picture, or as rosy a picture as possible. Entire clinical trials are run not as trials at all, but as under-the-counter advertising campaigns designed to persuade doctors to prescribe a company's drug. Based on what we know about the FDA and how the FDA and Big Pharma are basically one and the same, based on what The Economist said there, I wouldn't give the Gardasil vaccine to my worst enemy. And that's just my opinion. Let Andrew finish. Whether the women have messed up their numbers or not is not relevant right now. Go ahead, Andrew.
This could easily be the next thalidomide. We may be looking back on this in 5 years' time and deeply regretting our cynicism about the claims that these parents are making. It's a serious, serious problem. And really, I can't do no more than to raise people's awareness of the possibility that this injection is causing serious damage to some people. I don't know the numbers, but I honestly believe it could be.
We're talking about a company that manufactured Vioxx. We're talking about a company even, and along with some of its sister companies, who've been fined record fines over the last 10 years, billions and billions of dollars for falsifying data, for bribing doctors. How can we believe these companies, Andrew? Not to mention the fact that in 2011, the Supreme Court in America made it impossible, I should say, for people to sue them if they think their children have been affected by vaccines. This isn't just a case of some problems. It's more than a problem, right?
Yeah. Well, as a practicing doctor, I see a lot of problems coming from people who are taking drugs that have been developed in the last few years by pharmaceutical companies who are looking for diseases to treat. One disease is male pattern baldness. Now, we all know that male pattern baldness is not a disease. It's a natural progression of aging. And they're promoting this drug called finasteride, which is causing huge sexual problems among men. Absolutely horrible, toxic drug, and once they go off it, they can never perform sexually for the rest of their lives. That's finasteride for baldness. Then there's all these antidepressants, which are causing huge number of problems. Doctors are prescribing them. They are involved. They shouldn't be necessarily prescribing them. If somebody's being bullied at work, they should give some counselling, psychotherapy, and all these other alternative treatments. But here we have a vaccine now, which is clouded in doubt and worry.
That's not a very scientific term.
And we
let
should
him finish, and then you can come back and let him finish. Let him finish.
Because I'm going to have my supper now, if you don't mind.
Andrew, go ahead. Let him finish, William.
We should be questioning, and we should be allowed to question, and we should not necessarily take the so-called scientific peer review published studies as gospel. And let's all be slightly, agnostic about the whole thing, and just look at it with an open mind, not a closed mind like my friend, the journalist, has on the other side of the line here. Just have an open mind about it, because it is very, very serious. I think that's my closing statement, Ritchie, if you don't mind.
Fine, Andrew. Yeah, I really appreciate that, and thanks for taking the call, by the way. Really
You're
good to have you on the
welcome.
programme.